NJ.com and the Star Ledger welcome to the Rutgers Rant, your one-stop podcast for the Scarlet Knights, with your hosts Steve Politi and Rutgers insiders Brian Fonseca and Pat Lenny. Let's start chopping.
All right, hello everybody. Welcome back to the Rutgers Rant. It's been a minute. Been a couple minutes. We've been on a little spring hiatus here, but we're back. I think we've got enough to talk about, fellas. First, let me ask you, how you guys doing? How's your spring going?
Good. It's gorgeous outside. Things are kind of looking up, and the facade of amateur athletics has finally died. So that's probably been the highlight.
The iris has bloomed, Pat, and college sports crumbled. There you go. There's a headline for you.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Spring is awoken. What am I saying?
What?
Summer. Memorial Day weekend just passed. The official start of summer.
You're going to be down the shore listening to this on the beach, I hope, for all of you folks. All right, let's dive in. We got broke this down into like 7 different topics, things we missed, things we need to talk about. But we got to start with the big news, right? There's nothing else going on in college sports in the past, 100 years that matters as much as the complete end of amateurism. Essentially, that's what this is. The NCAA settlement in the big case, House versus the NCAA. $2.8 billion. I mean, there's so many things going on. We can't get into all of it. Listen to another podcast for all the breakdowns. I think people here want to know what it means for Rutgers. And the answer to that question is, I don't know. I think that's being honest, that we don't quite know what it means yet to Rutgers. The breakdown, though, I'm going to put this in your eye. Tell me if you guys agree. Anything that brings a little bit of cost certainty would be good for Rutgers athletics in the long term. Do you guys agree with that?
Yes, it's good to have a number that you can hit. I think it's even better to be in a league where you get enough money just off of TV revenue to make up for all those expenses. I think this is example number 1 million of Rutgers having to, every night before they go to bed, say thank you to somebody for being in the Big Ten, because they'll be able to afford all this because of that. I don't know where the money's going to go. I don't know how this will all work. You joked about it a couple weeks ago, Steve, about how Ross Dellinger updated us every single day on this case. I read every story, listened to every podcast, and I feel even dumber now than I did 2 weeks ago. I have no idea how this is going to work. I think a lot of people in the sports industry that have intimate knowledge of all this don't know how it's going to work. This is, if you thought NIL was the Wild West, wait till you see all this and how this kind of, all the butterfly effects of all this happens. I would say, though, I think this might be a good thing for Rutgers in that sense. Like you said, we know what they need. They have all the finances they have to fill out. Now it's just a matter of getting the money together, which at Rutgers has obviously historically been a bit of an issue. But now, at least, I don't think donors are going to have to be on the hook for this. You guys can tell me I'm wrong. I don't think they're going to have to be the ones that pay for all this, right?
Let's dive down to that, though, Pat. As someone who's been around Rutgers most of your life, the idea that, get the money, just get the money from another $22 million from Rutgers is bleeding a stone that, as we all know, is already lying in the ground without any. I mean, we can't imagine where that money is going to come from. It's going to be controversial. We know that. It's Rutgers. And I'm not saying this because I don't think Rutgers should ante up. I'm saying this from the standpoint of it's just the history of the university. Every time there's money involved, it's a thing. It's a big deal. It's a problem, right? I mean, that's going to be an issue, I think.
That's been the story of our lifetime as at Rutgers and in New Jersey as a whole. I go back to Rutgers in-state tuition is higher than any other in-state tuition for New Jersey. People are like, why is that? Well, cost of living, other things. It's just money is a never-ending topic when it comes to Rutgers and especially Rutgers athletics. So yeah, it's just it's a little trickle-down effect. But to go back to your first question, I think it ultimately has to be a good thing for Rutgers because there was no way to compete with big name Big Ten schools when there was no set cap or anything like that. So now that there should theoretically be somewhat of a level playing field, of course, there'll be, so much to break down if it ever will be truly level, but theoretically, maybe the government steps in or the way it's governed creates a level playing field. That has to be a good thing for Rutgers when it's trying to close a gap on other schools.
All right. So here's the flip side to that coin. And this is what would worry me if I'm at Rutgers. Say they do go all in. that Jonathan Howell is like, all right, look, we can't be in the Big Ten and not spend the $22 million. We're not going to, because it is optional. That's what all these stories say, that there's an optional amount of money you put toward it. If you're in the Big Ten, it's not optional. You got to spend the $22 million. They'll come up with that. What I'm reading now is, and you alluded to it, Brian, but I don't think these collectives are going anywhere. Like, I don't think the other side of this is going away. Like, all of a sudden, you can't build this thing like what Georgia's built. And what some of these places have massive collectives, like bringing all this money, and they're going to say, okay, we're done, fellas. We're done here. I think the guys at Rutgers would love to say that. Like the Knights of the Raritan guys would be like, oh, okay, that's good. All right, we're done. We're out. But I think other places, they're still going to be raising money, and they're still going to be trying to give money. And if we're counting on the NCAA to enforce this, to create a level playing field, I'm telling you that that's not going to happen.
This cat and mouse game we've been playing for the past 4 or 5 years is just like the NCAA says, okay, here's a rule, a definitive guideline that we will follow, and it will fix the issue. And then someone's like, all right, I'll take you to court, and they demolish the NCAA in court, and that new rule is gone. So they're going to try to put scholarship limits on football teams, for example, at 85 guys. And then you say, what about walk-ons? You can't just not let guys have walk-ons, and what the walk-ons won't get the 22 million, but the collective that somehow has a $10 million purse just happened to want to pay this walk-on $100,000 to appear at the local car dealership or whatever. There will be loopholes for all this stuff, and I just wonder where it's going to end. Like, I don't see the end here, because the NCAA has nothing left. Like, they can't win in court because they keep getting dismantled with everything. So I don't even know if this is the end of everything. I don't know if they're going to be able to put a cap with 22 million, because you're right. The collectives can argue that you can't cap a player's name, image, and likeness money. That's, you can't cap it. The Patrick Mahomes makes, let's say, for example, he can only make $100 million in his salary in the NFL. Just put a round number. But what's stopping Garnier for paying him $20 million to be in shampoo commercials? You can't cap that, obviously. We live in a capitalist society. So right. I don't know where the end is with this. That's my question. Like, this is just another step on the journey, I think.
Yeah, and there's two things that aren't coming up, and I'd be interested to see this. We're just now trying to sort through what it all means. The biggest unanswered question to me is Title IX. Are you going to, if you have $22 million, are you giving $11 million to your women's soccer and softball teams? It seems, no one's a bigger advocate of women's sports than me. I try to be, at least. That seems insane. Obviously, that's not what this is meant to do. It's meant to pay the revenue producing athletes. But that's kind of where this is going to head, I think. And that's going to be a really interesting thing to see how schools handle that. That's number one. Number two, this is closed the transfer portal. That's the biggest, you talk to coaches, that's what they're most tired of, is dealing with this constant re-recruiting of athletes. I haven't seen anything about that either.
I would say no to the transfer portal, because just think of how professional sports work. Right? You have a contract, and then you're ultimately seeking the next contract. And when you become unhappy with that contract, you seek another opportunity, whether that's, obviously in the NFL, it would be a trade or a free agency. So I don't think that would slow down the transfer portal at all, because, there's always going to be another opportunity somewhere. And it's obviously a player's right to go chase that opportunity. So I would say no to that. The Title IX aspect is fascinating, especially when you talk about roster limits, like Brian brought up with walk-ons, and how do you police a football team that has, 40 kids or whatever, 85 scholarships and 40 walk-ons, compared to the cross-country team that has 8 kids, or the golf team that has 6 kids, right? Like, it's really fascinating how that will work. And the Title IX aspect of it all is really fascinating as well. Yeah. So.
And you mentioned the scholarship limits. Interesting. That's the other side of this, Brian, is it could be a point where the Rutgers will be spending another $10 million on scholarships because of, baseball could have 25 scholarships. I've read this as well. Like, this is another hidden cost of this thing on top of everything else, is that all of a sudden the number of scholarships is going to go up.
Sure. But how long are we going to have scholarships? How long are there going to be student athletes and not just, semi-professional athletes that play for a sports team that has a licensing agreement with the university? I can see that happening within the next 3 years. With the Title IX thing, are we going to see sports cut in, I guess if you cut one woman's sport, you can cut a men's sport, but who's to say Title IX will last forever? Who's to say the Supreme Court won't see all this de-amateurization of college athletics and just say Title IX doesn't apply to college sports, it only applies to high school sports because they're scholastic? Who knows? where this thing is going to go. I don't think any of us could have predicted this would happen a year ago, or maybe we could have if we were, had enough foresight. But I don't know how it's all going to work out, and I think it's never been harder to be a college administrator, where for decades you kind of just lived lavishly off the backs of amateur athletes who played for free and made you millions of dollars, and now all of a sudden they have to actually kind of think and fix all these problems because they were not smart enough decades ago to see this coming.
3 years ago, they didn't want to pay the $5,000 stipend 3 years ago. Can you just imagine? Just think about that. And then look where we are now. It's just kind of fascinating. And if you came here looking for answers to this, we don't have it, because I don't think Rutgers has it at this point. It's going to be a fascinating year and a half to get this thing off the ground. At least we know next year we're by the same rules that next season that we've been through the past, whatever, how many years it's been with NIL. After that, though, hey, it's gonna be the Wild Wild West Part 10 here. All right. Move on to some other things here. Number 2 on my list of topics we have to talk about is a man named PJ Hayes. Only thing I know about him is that he's a 38 point something three-point shooter, and the man's got the greatest tattoo I think I've ever seen. Which one do you want to talk about first, Brian? The basketball or the tat?
Let's knock the tat out really quick. It's a very detailed image of Michael Jordan, or images of
images. Yes.
I not asked him about this in our interview after he committed. I will ask him eventually. My guess, he's from Minnesota, which I don't know if he was a Timberwolves fan. My guess is he idolized Michael Jordan growing up, as a lot of basketball players do. But maybe there's an interesting backstory there that we don't know. But
did you see the Pat tat? Did Pat tat? Did that? Did you see that Pat? Did you look at this?
That, Pat. No, I saw it. Yeah, I saw the Michael Jordan. Yeah,
he's talking to Patrick Ewing. Pat is tatted as well, I thought.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's great.
Anyway.
I caught a glimpse of it. And I guess what jersey, maybe it was the San Diego jersey, it's like Carolina blue as well. It looked really nice. Like, it looked like Jordan at Carolina too. It was fantastic.
Some good stuff. All right. We'll get to the bottom of that tat later. Let's talk basketball. Help on the wing. His interview with you was really compelling. Obviously a smart basketball player. Brian, describe what he essentially said about what his role would be and how it's going to help Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey.
Well, first of all, thank you. I worked really hard to get those quality answers out of him with my very intriguing and inquisitive questions. So thank you.
Yeah.
So he very clearly understands his role. He understands that he's coming in to be a guy to help the younger players, and he perfectly understands the value he brings as a 39.7% three-point shooter. Rutgers needed it to be able to space the floor for Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, because as good players they are off the dribble, when you're dribbling into a paint with 4 guys occupying it because no one around the perimeter could shoot, it's a lot harder. Now when you got PJ Hayes on the side, as he said, PJ Hayes' defender can't help off him, because if he helps off him, he's wide open to knock down a 3. And if he doesn't help off him, Dylan Harper or Ace Bailey have a one-on-one matchup and they're getting to the rim. So he adds that element. Him and Zach Martini are three-point shooters that Rutgers needed to get. I think of the many things Rutgers needed to plug with the transfer portal this offseason, three-point shooting is one box they checked. Absolutely. I think PJ Hayes checks that box as a shooter, as a veteran guy who's been around college basketball, played at the Division II level and went to back-to-back Final Fours, moved up to San Diego and proved he could play at that level. He seems confident he can move up to the Big Ten level. Brings some leadership along with that experience, and brings the three-point shooting. So I thought this was a great ad especially for the 12th scholarship. And in all seriousness, I was impressed with him as I spoke to him on the phone, and the reaction from the quotes from you and from the readers, I think kind of re-emphasizes that. I think really, really good addition for Rutgers.
All right. Number 3 on the list is a transition into this, is the fact that it's still no center. And I'm beginning to think there will be no center. That this is it. You're looking at the roster, and Steve Peichel has just decided that he can make it go with the guys he has in there now. And I'm thinking, based on what I'm reading between the lines here with the guys he's bringing in, that they're going to play a different style, where they're not going to have someone, the typical back to the basket. And they're going to have a guy who's protecting the rim in the way that they've had since Steve Peichel's been here. Tell me, am I wrong on that, Brian?
I would be surprised if they brought in a transfer portal center at this point. It looks like the 13th scholarship is going to go to a 2024 developmental big. They had this kid, Jamie Vincent, from Oak Hill, who had committed to Vanderbilt, decommitted. He visited South Carolina, Kentucky, Rutgers, Rice. Doesn't look like he's going to be that kid, but they got another kid, Victor Mikic, who he's from Chattanooga. Well, he's from Serbia, plays high school basketball in Chattanooga, plays for Athletes of Tomorrow, which is the AAU team that Ace Bailey and Jermichael Davis played for. He seems to be the prime candidate to fill that 13th role. He will play at most 2 to 3 minutes a game, the way it's looking, right? Very raw, very much a down the line kind of guy. Now, you say the way you framed that, I don't know if that's correctly. I'm not sure if Rutgers had the option of bringing in a high quality starting center, right? That costs a lot of money, and
Right.
we can assign blame wherever you want. That's kind of for everyone else to debate, whether that's the administration, whether that's Steve Peichel, whether that's the fans, whether that's 50 years of complete disregard for the athletic department rearing its ugly head for the umpteenth time. The fact of the matter is Rutgers did not have enough money to go into the center market and convince a quality guy who's a surefire starter, better than what they have, to come to Rutgers. I think that is pretty much indisputable.
Right.
Then you're into a discussion of whether is it worth bringing in a lower tier guy just because he's a veteran to fill the hole and risk one upsetting Lathan Somerville. I think that's the worry with every transfer you bring in is how does it impact the guys you have on the roster? If you're bringing a guard, how does Jeremiah Williams feel about it? If you're bringing a center, obviously, how does Lathan Somerville feel about it? And bringing that guy will marginalize him as a freshman, right? The more that transfer comes in and plays, the less minutes for Lathan Somerville. And you want this guy who you believe to be the center of the future to get good run as a freshman and play because you believe he can play, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think between that option, getting a developmental big, it seems like the developmental big is the choice. And I think that is going to be undoubtedly the biggest question mark they have entering the season and will determine really the trajectory of the season. I think they feel confident that Zach Martini could fill into some role at the 5 and play that offense you're talking about, the lack of a back to the back big, kind of have a stretch 5 who could shoot the ball, and on the defensive end, figure it out because Steve Peichel always manages to do that somehow. And then you got to hope that Emmanuel Ogbole, who's played less than 100 minutes of Division I basketball, and he's going to be, I think, 23 years old when the season starts. And he's coming off, again, a season where he barely played because he came off a torn ACL. You got to hope he has a big summer and figures things out quickly. And you got to hope that Lathan Somerville is as good or better than his recruiting ranking. Just a lot of question marks at a very important position. I know you have Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey. I know they cover up a lot. I know they feel a lot. But I think, and the fan base feels the same way because of everything I'm reading, I think everyone is looking at this roster and wondering how will they be able to perform without a bona fide starting center after losing one of the greatest centers in program history in Cliff O'Morey to Alabama. And just to kind of put a bow on this, that really just shows the discrepancy here. Cliff O'Morey went to Alabama for reportedly a 7-figure payout. We can't verify those numbers, but Rutgers is not even in the same vicinity. If 1.4 million is Yankee Stadium, Rutgers might be in Alabama at this point. Like it's just not even close.
Pat, for those reasons, and when I grading the overall portal grade, if this is it, I'm going B-. What do you think?
I think Rutgers did as well as it realistically could, given the restrictions, but I think that's a fair grade. I just keep coming back to the idea of when you're recruiting these kids out of the portal, you have one of the greatest pitches that you have this star-studded incoming class. We've got 1 year to really go after it. Why not come join this team? I think the guys that they got are all bought into that idea. Like we all have a role to play on this team. And I think that's the opposite of what happened last year. So I think that's what swings it into the B range for me.
Yeah.
But you're right. Like you could get up to an A if you had the big guy. I understand the reasons that Brian just explained, but I think it's fair.
And it does show you they did get guys who bought into that. Both Martini and Hayes talking about wanting to play with that, but the vast majority of guys in basketball and in the portal are looking for my minutes and my bag. Essentially, Brian, do you agree with B-? You're going to go higher or lower?
I think they filled the 3-point shooting hole, which people have been driving people mad for decades at Rutgers. They can't shoot a 3. So in theory, those guys could fill that hole. Although on paper, Noah Fernandes was supposed to be a great 3-point shooter last year, and for whatever reason, could not fill that role. I'm not sure if we should just pencil in those two guys as 40% shooters next year. Although, in fairness, Cam Spencer was a 40% shooter, and he filled that spot when he came. Whatever. I have a couple question marks. The center question mark, which we've gone over, and we will
Mhm.
go over ad nauseum between now and March. We will talk about this so many times, it's going to make you sick. You're never going to want to see a center ever again. And these guys are all for all they are, veteran guys, hungry, bought in, willing to play the roles that Rutgers needed. They needed role guys to be around the two freshmen. They don't have any high major experience. It's asking a lot for them all to make the jump up to the Big Ten level and all make a successful transition. I just think that would take incredible luck for all four of them to work out.
Yeah.
Um,
All of them make steps up, and you're counting on the two guys coming in to not have their own adjustment issues from high school basketball to big time college basketball too. You're counting on that as well. Yeah, it's a lot to ask.
yes, you're putting in a brand new roster where you have 3 returnees, right now 5, maybe 6 freshmen, and 4 portal guys. And you're supposed to meld them all together in about 3 to 4 months and then send them out to Las Vegas to play 2 of the top 10 teams in the country. It's a lot to ask. But to answer your question about the portal pickups, I'd say, C plus to B minus range is where I'd stay. I kind of agree with you. They really needed a center. They probably could have gotten, I don't know. It feels like they got good guys. I don't know if they got anyone great. I know the 2 freshmen are great. I know. I'm just saying.
We're talking portal. We're not talking next year's team. Yeah. So B minus. I agree with you. C plus, B minus. All right. You covered this briefly. Cliff to Bama getting a 7-figure payday, which I believe was between Bama and my alma mater, North Carolina. I think Cliff made the right choice, going to Bama and playing in a system where they're not going to count on him to, hit a 2-foot shot with regularity. As that would seem to be what he was going to be required to do at North Carolina. Good decision by him. I'm going to go right segue to number 5 on my list, scheduling madness. The fact that Cliff will be one of the first half dozen games this team plays next year is kind of fascinating. I love the basketball. This is words I've never said. I love the basketball schedule next year, and not just because I've already booked the MGM Grand for Thanksgiving week. But that's great. Let's talk about that, Brian. You've broken this down. Vegas is not just interesting because you're going to watch, the 2 freshmen against the best competition. It's because who they're playing as well.
And they're going to Vegas. And we're going to Vegas. Yeah. Lose so much money on the craps table. Anyway, I think.
By the way, Pat, while you were gone, we're sending you going to East Lansing just in case you haven't figured this out already.
I listen. I saw the schedule come out. I didn't need the confirmation.
The writing was on the wall on that one.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Sorry about that.
Well, at least maybe he'll be covering a winning football team, which is good. Solidify Turkey weekend with a 10-2 record.
Big game.
Yes. So the scheduling in Vegas worked out great. Great storylines. They're playing a rematch with Cliff O'Morey. They're playing Notre Dame, who was the last team to knock them out of the NCAA tournament, and who beat them for Matt Alaco, who was the original sharpshooting guy they were going for, try to pair him up with Zach Martini. And they're playing Houston, which knocked them out of the first tournament they were in for 30 years, and really was blocked the path to Final Four. That was right in front of them. And came back from, 10 points down or 8 points down with 8 minutes to go. Just a loss. I don't think Rutgers fans will, stomach anytime soon, but now they can get revenge. So good experience, a chance to get 2 high-level quad 1 wins early on in the season. And even if you lose, it doesn't really ding your resume. So perfect scheduling there. They're going to Kennesaw State as kind of a gift to Jermichael Davis and Ace Bailey, going down about 10 miles away from McEachern's campus where they played high school basketball. And that's a road game, right? I guess kudos to Rutgers because not a lot of high major teams play low to mid major teams on the road. And that's a dangerous spot because if you lose that game, that might be a quad 3 or quad 4 loss, despite it being on the road. Playing Princeton again, while it was not their original choice, Arkansas was the original opponent before Musselman decided to go to USC.
Is that right? I didn't know that. Interesting. Okay.
That's according to Jerry Carino. He had it first. I know Puggle and Calipari have a relationship, but I guess they did not decide to continue that planning. But they are playing Princeton instead, so I guess it kind of worked out in a good way. I am still not happy that they're not playing a home and home.
Yeah.
That I think is the ideal scenario, but I guess this is the rematch of the neutral court matchup, and at least it's not in Trenton.
Exactly, but part of my soul is still in Trenton. There's still a fan still trying to park down there, so thank God it's not that. Anything's better than that, but it's weird. Why play it in a you know, in NBA, essentially NHL level arena, when you've got two great college facilities, I just don't understand. But at least they're playing each other. That's good news.
Yes, the Cure Insurance Arena will never recover from the PR nightmare, by the way, because every Rutgers
Close that
podcast
place
that
down.
has talked about Princeton has just demolished that. The day they demolish that place down, whether it's in 50 years or in 5, we'll have every Rutgers writer and fan outside the building cheering for the construction crew for knocking it down.
They carry it down. We're with the Paw Patrol event. Paw Patrol, I don't think it was even Paw Patrol on Ice. It was just Paw Patrol. Where would that be if they tear it down? Very sad.
Very sad.
All right.
And they have a couple of low major teams coming to Jersey Mike's Arena.
Okay.
They're playing Wagner. They're playing St. Peter's. They're playing Columbia. And I think they have 2 more spots to fill. I'm not sure where it's going to go, but my guess is that it's going to be 2 more low major teams to kind of fill out the schedule. And I'm assuming they're all going to Jersey Mike's Arena. It looks like they'll have, I think the math was like they'll have 15 or 16 home games, which is less than they usually do.
Yeah.
So less opportunity for Rutgers fans who paid more money for their season tickets are going to watch less games in the most exciting season in program history. Just another little RU screw for everyone, but that's looking like what it's going to be.
Speaking of RU screws, Pat, the little development football team playing at 11 p.m. against USC. Although I will say this: the first when that popped up and I saw that and recognized that game is getting into 2:45 a.m. Eastern Coast, that I said to me, I've never been more certain of Rutgers winning a game than this one. The go to Southern Cal, pull off the upset over the Trojans in Los Angeles, and it ends at 2:45 in the morning, and the next day. People are like, who did Rutgers play? I didn't see that score. Oh, they beat Southern Cal. No, they didn't. I didn't see that. Come on, it's going to be it's just like the perfect RU screw.
It really is. It really is. It's yeah. Now you say it, it's so true. And the idea of why it's so late, I only read this recently. It's because it's following Game 1 of the World Series. So they're thinking that they'll get some carryover audience of people that just forgot to turn the TV off.
The Dodgers fans, you'll even the 6 innings.
World Series? Unless, here you go though. The Yankees could be in the World Series the way they're playing, and then you carry that over. You got the whole. It could be good. It could be good for a New York, New Jersey audience.
Until it's Orioles versus help me out with an NL team. I don't even have one.
Dodgers in LA. Yeah.
Good luck with that. But okay, so just you can't complain though, Pat. You're in the Big Ten. This is it. This is
what the Big Ten wanted when they could have, a game on Friday night at 11 o'clock, just bringing in eyeballs at all times. They're going to have games running basically start to finish on Saturday. It's big money to be had, and this is the price you got to pay for it.
The Washington game also prime time at home. I think that's a good draw for Rutgers on a Friday night. It makes sense to me.
Game. Yeah.
Every time I look at this schedule, I get a little bit more, So that's a good development, I believe, for the Scarlet Knights.
I know you guys are going to have a good time in Las Vegas without me, but I'm not pounding my head against the wall going to Michigan State on things. I think it's going to be a really big spot.
Of course,
it's going to be a big game.
For the bowl, there's no question. No, absolutely. Yeah, you talked me into it. Maybe I'll go there instead. Nah, probably not going to do that. Can't do both.
Can't do both.
Can't do both.
Guy going to Paris in a couple of months.
Yeah, Paris, Vegas. By the way, I also got to do that Southern Cal trip, even though it starts at, What is this correlation between where Politi goes on trips? No. It's weird, isn't it?
It really is.
He's not fighting. You know what? I'm going to give you another one. You guys can have Omaha. You can have Lincoln. All right. A couple more things before we get to your insider questions. Really quick, Gavin Wimsatt to Kentucky. No surprise, although it seems like he is going from a situation where he would have been a Wildcat / backup quarterback to a situation where he's going to be a Wildcat backup quarterback. It's kind of weird. Pat, your thoughts on that one? I guess that's just kind of the way of the world here. I don't know.
I thought of the Bon Jovi song, "Who Says You Can't Go Home." I think has a big part of it. He's going back to Kentucky, where he's from. He's more comfortable, right? It's just maybe a better situation for him, and who knows what could happen. I guess. But you're right. On the surface, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
I would just say it's in opposite directions. At Rutgers, he went from the starter to a backup. So he's going down. When he goes to Kentucky, he starts as the backup, can always convince himself he can try to win the starting job. And like Pat said, he's going home. I was surprised only by how quickly it happened. went to the portal on Wednesday, and by the following Wednesday, he was already committed to Kentucky. It was his only visit. So it seemed like he was pretty set on going home. And look, it didn't work out here at Rutgers for various reasons with which I wrote. And it's I think disappointing for Rutgers fans who have been following this program, seeing the excitement that happened when he committed, when he enrolled early, when he completed that first pass against Illinois. The imaginations ran wild. Rutgers finally had a quarterback, and then you're here 2.5 years later, back-to-back years, the least accurate quarterback in college football, and you're back to square one with eighth in Cali McManus.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, and this will be if he does climb to the top of that depth chart and jumpstart his career. It's going to be really just a indictment of the Rutgers coaching staff if that happens. I wrote, and this is funny, I usually have a pretty good feel of what's a controversial column. When I wrote the column about that Rutgers once again failed to develop a quarterback, a fair number of fans flipped out at me and said, you can't blame this on developmental. You can't teach a quarterback how to be accurate. And my thought is that then what, okay, well then what do we have these what can we blame coaches for? If you can't coach a quarterback up to be a better player, you can't coach a wide receiver to catch the ball, you can't coach an offensive lineman to block. I mean, it's just such a weird argument that a lot of people were making at me. No matter which group of coaches, it's the same people. Either you blame them for not developing them, or you blame them for bringing a recruit here who wasn't good enough. Like one of the two, and it's the same group of guys. Right. And that they failed again, and it's a shame, but we're still waiting for the next quarterback. If you want to give it to Gary Nova, I think that's fair, but you can go back to Mike Teal. I mean, it's been a long time since they've had a quarterback, too long time.
If you can't teach a kid how to be accurate, that means he was never accurate to begin with. So if it's not a failure in development, it's a failure in scouting. Either way, somebody messed up somehow. But the bottom line is this: Rutgers thought it had its quarterback. Rutgers did not have its quarterback.
All right. And here's the big news, Pat. The real big news. Anthony Ashnault to Princeton? Whoa, what?
That's exactly my reaction.
What?
I pulled on my phone. What? Yeah. My gut, everyone saying the right things. It's like Saquon Barkley going from the Giants to the Eagles. Yeah. Go from the heart and face of being the face of Rutgers to a rival school. I get it. Like there aren't any openings on the Rutgers staff. It's not like they have 30 graduate assistant or support staff spots to fill. They have their 3 coaches and they're doing a great job, and that's it, right? Like that's how it works. Yeah. So you can't blame anyone for Anthony Ashnault trying to get into college coaching. This was clearly where he was going to go. He's a New Jersey guy through and through. He stays at home. It's a good program. He'll do a great job there.
Wow. All right. Lightning round. We got a few other things. Chris Goddard wins a PGA event. I was watching it. Tell you how my weekends are going. Sitting there watching the Myrtle Beach Classic. Women's golf wins the equivalent of the WNIT. I don't know what that means. Someone's going to have to fill me on that one. And Rutgers adds a right tackle transfer. Okay. Shoot.
So the golf thing, it's the second year they had it. I believe it's the College Golf Invitational. It's essentially, like I said, the NIT of college golf. They usually only have the NCAA tournament. This recently implemented tournament came about last year, and Rutgers Golf won it this year. So a nice way to cap off a standout season. And Rutgers got this kid, Shedrick Rhodes from Ohio. He's a right tackle, started every game there, can play a little bit of right guard. But it seems like this is a kid that's going to come in and compete and likely win the right tackle starting spot. So that fills a question mark along the offensive line that we had coming out of spring. And he has a little bit of versatility. So if they want to put Reggie Sutton out at right tackle and him at right guard, they could in theory, or Tyler Needham at right tackle and him at right guard. So they landed a guy there who his grades look good on PFF and on paper looks like a strong addition.
Clearly a team recognizing they have a hole, Pat, and filling it.
Or at the very least, going back to what we saw last year with an experimental positioning where people will develop if they will earn the job through playing well. And I think the competition there will sort itself out. And you have 3 options now on the right side, which is a lot better than than having, 1 or 0. So I think it was a great move.
All right. We covered as much as we could that we missed. Let's dive into some insider questions. We touched on a bunch of them. We had a lot of really good questions about the NCAA settlement, which, again, we're still sorting through. The one that keeps on coming up is, will collectives still exist? Brian, I just read, again, Ross Dellinger does a wonderful job at Yahoo Sports. Get senses that, yes, in some way they will exist, but maybe as an arm of the athletic departments as well. I mean, what have you read? What's your sense?
My sense is yes, they will still exist. They could be used as a loophole to pass the cap, right? If you can only give 22 million to your roster, but you want to pay your quarterback an extra $1 million to get the top guy, the collective could be the person there that gets the money from the local car dealership to pay for it or whatever. Like, it's, to me, I view it as a way to circumvent the cap that the NCAA is trying to put in. So I just cannot see a future where they don't exist or some version of them exists.
Todd from Little Egg Harbor, do you think there will be a revenue, non-revenue sports split? Can you really pay the starting quarterback the same as the starting third baseman on the baseball team? No, to answer that question. But Pat, I do think that Rutgers isn't going to SEC this, for a better way of putting it. Like, they've been pretty straight and narrow to, I mean, we've talked about it a million times with NIL, to basically a fault, avoiding doing what a lot of other places have just been doing out in the open. I don't think that Rutgers is going to, want this in a way that's going to call attention to themselves. They don't want the negative publicity of their starting the women's soccer team standing up at a press conference and railing the fact that they're not getting money.
Yeah, it'd be horrible, especially for a Northeastern university that prides itself on history and tradition and doing the right things. I think that'd be an absolute black stain. I would make the argument that there has been a split from revenue and non-revenue sports in the last 20 years, right? Like, if you think about resources and what's given to the team, it's just been an unwritten part of society, I guess. But it certainly exists. And I think you could talk to any college athlete about what they get versus what, a revenue producing sport gets. It's very different.
We had a couple of questions, I like the frisky, fun questions. With the Rutgers football schedule, what would it take record-wise to make the 12-team college football playoff? The first one. The second one is, what record and upset win would make this a successful season? So someone obviously doesn't think that they have to make the playoffs to have a successful season. I mean, come on, man. But let's address the first one. 12-team playoff. Big Ten's going to get 3. What record does Rutgers have to get in there? 11-1?
Yeah, I was going to say 1 loss. If you look at the last couple of years, right, like the Penn States that are floating around like 10 to 12 have 1 loss, and it's usually to Ohio State or Michigan, right? Or I guess they had 2 last year.
But was that 11-1 going into the Big Ten championship game at that point? Can it be 10-2 and not in the Big Ten championship game?
Yeah,
you can tell we have spent a lot of time.
I think you'd have to have. If you were in the Big Ten championship game, I think you'd be in the top 12, is a good way to put it.
Yeah. Okay.
So I would say 10-2 was my original thought. But here's where we've been praising Rutgers' schedule, how it's so much easier, how there's no big hitters on the schedule, how it benefits Rutgers. When it's time to try to get an at-large bid to the top 12 and your strength of schedule is not as strong as it has been in the past few years when you had the heavy hitters, that might weigh against you, because you're not playing a strong schedule, so you don't have the signature wins that you need to convince the committee to put you in. So I would say 10-2 gives you a good shot, but you need to win all your toss-up games, and you need to, like, what would be the big upset, the big signature win on that schedule? Do they have a top 10 team on that schedule?
Oh, wow, geez, that's a great question. To start the season?
No,
just
USC could be if everything goes well.
They beat USC on the road. Yeah, I mean that would be it.
You'd have to hope USC is 11-1 and their 1 loss is to Rutgers.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, the schedule's too soft, is what you're saying.
I'm saying unless Rutgers goes undefeated with this soft schedule or 11-1, I don't know if it's strong enough or has enough strong wins to convince a committee to put them in as the 3rd Big Ten team versus the 7th SEC team. It's not easy to Again, it's only 12 teams, right? So I guess to answer the question, 11-1 to feel safe. 10-2 gives you an outside chance. Look at us talking about 10-2 Rutgers.
Yeah, I'm going to say this, and this is just totally off the top. I've not given this any thought, but I wonder at 10-2 if your choice is going to, going to Auburn, going to Alabama to play a first round playoff game, or shuffling off to the Orange. Like, I'm trying to do a really nice bowl game. Like, I don't know what bowl games are going to be left, and taking your fans down to a real one, not to the Bronx on December 27th, going to a real bowl game with your entire fan base, the game you never went to with the 2016. What would you rather do? That's a good question too.
Big question.
You're not in the playoff. I get it, but
you got to be in the playoff. You got to be in the. You got to chase the.
I hear what you're saying.
What are you
doing?
Totally what are you doing?
I understand that. I'm just saying, from a fan perspective, at the end of a season, this is it. Okay, good. We're playing our best ball game ever. Is not a bad consolation prize.
I'd rather get shellacked by Alabama by 40 points.
You'd rather go to Tuscaloosa and get your ass kicked.
Yeah,
by
100%.
You're nodding too. Interesting.
No doubt. Okay. No doubt. Because fine, that Saturday will suck when you're just spanked by Alabama. But think about the 5 days before that game. Think about being in the office on Thursday, talking over the water cooler and convincing yourself that the Scarlet Knights could maybe defeat the Crimson Tide. Just think about what that would mean for Rutgers that week leading up. It'd be the most exciting time in Rutgers athletics, ever. And I just don't think going to the Orange Bowl to face a disappointed Clemson Tigers team would just match the same buzz. I just don't. And I think you got to think about this too. If Rutgers is in that position this year, are we sure they will ever be in that position ever again to make a playoff? Well, like, there's no sure thing here. There's no. Do you take, what is the saying? Bird in hand or two in the bush or whatever? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So do you take bird in the hand? I would take the bird in the hand easy because I don't know. Will the schedule ever be this soft? Will the team ever have this many returning players? Will you ever have this much talent? You'd like to think yes, but you never know. So I think you take the sure thing.
Yeah. I don't know. If the two in the bush is the Rose Bowl, I might take the bush. All right. Good question though. That'll be fun. Something to talk about before they're in a life and death game against Virginia Tech in week 3. All right. Dive into some of this. I love this one. Do you think New Brunswick bars will get an extension to stay open past 2 a.m. for the USC game? I mean, do you live in New Jersey? No. New Brunswick bars are going to close right there at the start of the fourth quarter. Yeah, you better make plans other than your New Brunswick bars for that game. Do you disagree, guys? You think they're going to stay open?
Bill Murphy is a friend of Rutgers. Can't the bar stay open past 2 a.m. and just not serve alcohol?
Yeah, but I mean, gonna pay the staff? I don't know. Can they? I have no idea if they can.
What's the one bar that's open at like 6 or 7 a.m. on game day?
Kelly's
bar.
Kelly's, which unfortunately is no
They're
longer
staying open till 4 a.m. There's no question.
They're closed?
Kelly's is closed, unfortunately. RIP.
Oh no.
And here's another one. A throwback helmet question. It's the 30th anniversary of the 5-1 almost bowl eligible 1994 game. They sent me a picture of the helmet. What are the odds of getting an NJ Rutgers throwback helmet? You remember the old helmets with the Rutgers in like some ancient font, and then you had NJ above it just in case for everyone who had no freaking clue where Rutgers was from. Remember these helmets? I think you have a better chance of Greg Schiano coaching the basketball team than you do of him agreeing to that helmet. He hates this stuff. And this is the background of this. For you guys, might even know this, like of the entire history of why there's a block R is because Greg Schiano hated all of these other secondary logos. The one he hated the most, and he'll talk about it. It's great. He hated the one where it says Rutgers and there's a knife putting the sword in the middle of Rutgers. Like he thought this was you have a knife, you have a sword stabbing through the heart of Rutgers. He thought this was just like an offensive logo. He hated them all. He hated the Knight. He hated all the Rutgers scripts. They got rid of every one of them, and they slowly brought some in the back when he was gone. So no, there's no chance that Greg Schiano is going to approve any throwback uniform, even as your New York Football Giants, Pat, are dressing like the Montreal Canadiens this season, based on some little quirk of history that no one knows. Because I don't care what colors they wore in 1930, Pat. You can't see them because they were black and white photos. We have no idea what they look like. It's not like you're looking back, you're like nostalgia for some uniform from 1930.
I want you to use this in a column that they're going with the Tommy DeVito chicken cutlet brown pants.
It's good.
Right? There you go.
Yeah. Tommy DeVito.
I had a month to think about that one.
Yeah. You're bringing it today. Yeah, Tommy DeVito will be starting quarterback for that game at that point too. All right. Anything else? No? You're both looking at me like we covered a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
For the next episode, we'll come back. Maybe we'll do the year in review. Sound good? Recap the entire year. Couple of thumbs up. All right. So we'll be back in a couple weeks to do that. Until then, enjoy this wonderful weather and thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Rutgers Rant. To participate in the conversation and receive live updates about the Scarlet Knights directly to your phone, sign up at NJ.com/insider.